Today we're going to be looking at Anish's great game against Magnus Carlsen that was played today on January 17th. And it was a very insane game. So Anish started with d4, knight f6, c4, e6, and then he played knight f3. Did not want to go for the Nimzo where he plays knight c3 and Magnus goes bishop b4. So he chose the other line, which is knight f3. And then Magnus played b6. This is called the Queen's Indian, because now the bishop, the light square bishop, is either going to go to b7 or a6 to attack the pawn on c4. So Anish played g3 to play bishop to g2, fianchetting the bishop, and the line goes like this. So Magnus plays bishop a6 to attack this pawn, and he wants Anish to play e3 so that after the bishop protects the pawn, the light squares are going to be really weak. And after g3, white does not want to play e3. So instead, Anish defends the pawn with the queen, and then Magnus retreats the bishop, and it's kind of counterintuitive to play the bishop here and then back. But Magnus says, okay, queen is on c2. I'd rather have the queen on c2 than on d1. So Anish plays bishop to g2, c5, strike in the center, and here Anish sacrifices a pawn with d5. Magnus captures, and knight captures. So at the moment Anish is down a pawn, but the knight is blocking the bishop, and at some point this knight can move away and open up this bishop, so the knight can be in danger and it will be pinned. So Anish plays castle, bishop to e7, and then rook d1, pressuring this knight, knight c6. And now Magnus is blocking his own bishop, and he's setting up a trap. If Anish captures this knight with the rook, then black is a really good move, and it's not very hard to see. Black is going to play knight to b4, doing a fork, and then Magnus is going to win the rook. So that's why Anish does not capture the knight. Instead, he plays queen to f5, so there is no knight b4 anymore, and Anish wants to capture the knight with the queen. So now Magnus needs to play the knight, so he goes back, e4, getting more space and preparing pawn to e5 to kick this knight out from f6. So Magnus plays d6, still e5, because if the pawn takes, then the rook is going to take the queen. So he plays queen d7, offers a queen trade, captures, and now since the queen is gone, Anish can capture this free pawn with the pawn, attacking the bishop. So now the bishop needs to move, and here he gives a check. The king runs away and develops the knight. So this knight is going to be very strong when it comes to d5 or to e4. So Magnus plays knight to b4, stopping knight d5 with the knight and the bishop, and also threatening knight to c2, doing a fork here. So to stop this, Anish played knight to e5. Now, it's a very, very tactical move. Why does it stop? Well, if black plays knight to c2, this actually is really bad for Magnus, because now this comes with check, the king runs away, and here Anish can capture the bishop with the bishop. And if, let's say, Magnus captures the rook, then Anish can capture the rook, and Anish is up 2 minor pieces, completely winning position. So here, after knight e5, there is no knight c2, and also the bishop is open. So Magnus needs to be careful of this light square bishop. So he takes the knight, Anish takes the bishop, and then now the rook goes to d8 to attack this pawn. So Anish defends it and sidestep any fork with knight c2. So knight goes to c4, attacking this pawn. He saves the pawn by playing d7, knight c2, and then rook b1. Knight d4, blocking the rook and threatening to capture the pawn. And here, Anish plays a really nice move. He goes for b4, attacking the pawn on c5. And the point of this is, if black captures the pawn, Anish is going to capture with the rook, attack this knight, and if this knight moves, then the rook is going to attack the other knight. So let's say knight goes to d6, attacking the bishop. So now we don't have time to capture this knight since our bishop is under attack. So we can retreat the bishop, and now both of these knights are under attack. So he needs to play maybe knight to f5, but then we can simply play knight to d5 here. So this would be really good for white. So that's why instead of that, Magnus captures the pawn, which is not the best way. Bishop retreats, attacking the knight, so the knight needs to move. Knight moves away, captures. Now the b file is opened. These knights are not that good, and this pawn is an isolated pawn, and no piece is protecting that. So that's why Anish plays bishop a3, develops the bishop, and threatens to capture that pawn, and then captures the pawn. The knight retreats, attacking the bishop, and here Anish just brings the bishop back. Magnus plays a5, still wants the bishop. Anish captures, rook c8, and then knight to a4, threatening a fork on b6. And Magnus plays knight to c4, rook to c1, bishop to e5. Anish gives a check here, and in this position Anish plays a really good move. So if you want to find it out, you can pause the video. I'll give you like 3 seconds. So here Anish plays knight to c5. Now blocking the rook, attacking this rook and the knight. So it's going to be obstruction. The knight captures. Now Magnus's own knight is blocking the rook. So Anish captures the knight with the rook, and now the knight is pinned. So Magnus doubles, but now after bishop a5, this is a completely losing position because Anish wants to capture the rook. If the rook ever moves, let's say to a7, then there's bishop to b6 doing a fork, and Anish is gonna win the knight. Any other moves after bishop a5 would also lose. For example, rook to e7 is a move, but then we can play bishop to g2 and then try to go for rook to d5 or bishop to b4, taking advantage of this knight being pinned. So if you enjoy that, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.